Good morning. The September 26th board work session is now in order. Paul, roll call, please.
Mr. Susan?
Here.
Ms. Wright?
Here.
Ms. Campbell?
Here.
Ms. Jenkins?
Here.
Mr. Trent?
Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Good morning, board members and staff. I wanted to take a second and kind of go through the process. If you guys have here, Ms. Han has put together an 8,000 policy review paper. On there, it has each one of the policies that we have. It also has, if there's a Neola update on that policy, also has who it is that we're supposed to direct any questions to, and then any comments next to it. Thank you, Ms. Han, who is taking over for Dr. Rendell because he is at an event this morning.
Just temporarily.
Just temporarily. So there's going to be a handoff. You'll move one seat over and he'll step
sir.
in. I just wanted to say thank you to that. Thank you, everybody, for being here today. I appreciate you guys and your time and your efforts. This policy review process is getting to be pretty fine-tuned, and I'm excited because it seems that we now have a, you know what I mean, whereas before we were kind of moving through it, this is now going to go very quickly. So the other thing I would mention to the board members are there's a couple of policies that are up today. 8405 is one of them. Ms. Han has asked us that there's a lot moving around on that policy, that if we can keep our comments, you know what I mean, mentioned to her offline and just say it because there's so much to it that she would like to take some time to develop what the next step is. So any other questions on the processes and stuff like that we have today? All right. We can start today. Let me get this out of the way because just like Ms. Campbell has the Starship Enterprise over here. We all have it because, and just so the public understands, we have not only our policies that we had to review, we have the Neola policies that may or may not have been updated through the years over the last 10, 20 years. Then we have the Neola policies that were updated since July, and then we have our other policies that we sometimes interject with that may not be in Neola. So there's a four-pronged process, and if you know, this is amazing because it's going to go as smooth as it has the last time, so I appreciate your time. So I'm going to go to the first one that we have, which is that I have. So what I've done is I've taken my policy review booklet that we had printed out for us. I'm going to go through that as the core, then I'm going to move through the rest of them. So the first one that we have, I'm seeing something that says 7550 joint use of facilities, but what I'm seeing on mine is 8141. You want to speak to?
So yes, I do want to speak to both of those. So
Perfect.
7550, if you recall from the 7,000 policy review, 7550 is a BPS policy only. Neola does not have that policy. The Neola policy that is aligned with that is policy 8100. And so I just put 7550 on there to remind everybody that I believe we're going to recommend most likely that we delete 7550 and adopt 8100, but I want to have an opportunity to review the language, make sure that it does in fact meet all of our requirements. So that's what that one's about. So if you could refer that one to staff, we will take care of that.
And if you guys remember, I think it was even in our last board meeting, we have interlocal agreements with many of our local cities and counties where we're getting ready to move forward with the cities' agendas with each one of the cities, which is amazing. So thank you for that.
We have several coming up.
Does anybody else have any questions on 7550, which just became 8100? So the first one is 8100, and we're on that one. Anybody have anything to say? No? Okay. Next one up is 8141, mandatory reporting of misconduct by employees. The chief of schools was supposed to be there, but he has been called to a school today. Since he's the chief of them, he's being called to them. Ms. Han, did you wish to discuss that?
I just want to comment on this, that we'll be working with HR on this policy. So Mr. Raymer will be taking the lead and working with Mr. Dufresne, and we'll bring this back to you with our review, unless you have comments that you'd like us to consider.
Thank you for that. Does any board member wish to speak to any of the points in the mandatory reporting of misconduct by employees? Yep.
My microphone is so far away
Just
because I
grab it.
have so much stuff. So
You can grab it like
about to
microphone
karaoke.
like you're
Here we go.
singing. There
Hold
you
on.
go. There you go.
Give me a second. No, I'm not. It's not coming out of there willingly. Okay. Just want to say really fast, as far as the clarification goes, I was asking this question just recently. to make sure our staff is trained adequately, because we see the reports, I'm sure all of you are seeing them, over DCF calls that are made that sometimes don't warrant a phone call. So just making sure that, hey, if a kid cusses at you, that probably doesn't warrant a DCF phone call, depending on what they're saying. So I just think we want to make sure we have clear procedures there. That is happening from time to time from school, so.
Thank you.
Do you want to speak to that, Ryan, or no?
Yeah, I do a little bit.
Okay, good.
I hear what you're saying when something of, cussing out a teacher doesn't require or doesn't warrant a phone call. Hello. I've been in school districts where teachers have lost their jobs because they didn't report something to DCF.
Right.
So I would rather our employees be err on the side of caution, and also know that they are all mandatory reporters.
Right.
And so I'd rather them err on the side of caution and call and the DCF say, no, we're not going to do it. But that covered our employees to not have to worry about unreporting things. We actually even took steps and put numbers on the back of all the ID cards this year, because I don't want to see another employee fired because they didn't report.
And make no mistake, when I say that, that is not my intention at all, is to say, hey, tell our staff not to report. My concern is that we are inundating DCF with phone calls that maybe aren't really reportable offenses. So
Sure.
just clearly defining to the staff, hey, this is a reportable offense, this is not a reportable offense. When in doubt, call. Always
Right.
err on the side of caution. I
Right.
agree 100%. So, and especially when it comes to just making sure that our children are safe and getting the protection they need. So I'm not trying to put our staff in a jeopardizing position. I just didn't want DCF to be inundated with a bunch of phone calls over cursing children that maybe don't warrant a phone call, if that makes sense. So
I understand.
That's the only thing.
I understand.
Yeah, thank you.
Any other school board member wish to discuss this item? In regards to mine, one of the things that Mr. Dufresne, that I always wrestle with this policy is almost like a good Samaritan, because there's a lot of other things that we want to report, whether that's, so there's a lot of things that staff sees that later we find out that they knew that we did not report.
Correct.
There's Good Samaritan laws across the United States. There's some strong ones, some weak ones, stuff like that. Have you thought in that regard in here? Is that something we as a school district should stay away from because of the
Mandatory report, it really kind of, and Paul might be able to kind of help me on this, but I think that's going to override any of that. Like, if you're a mandatory reporter and you don't report.
But it's only, the mandatory reporting, according to the state statute, is to deal with the health and safety of the students.
Correct.
There's also the health and safety of employees. There's the health and safety of the overall, like they may hear something of destruction to a building. There's knowing out there that sometimes the students and the staff know that they have to report something when they see it, because that narrow scope of, which is a very strong scope and a strong reason of student safety is one thing, but then there's a whole lot more that we do that staff and students should be reporting. Has there ever been a thought process around that? Okay. I hear.
I
see you
can't
taking
speak.
some deep
I can't
breaths.
speak historically because I've
Yeah,
only
yeah.
been here since June. So
Well, your knowledge from
Yeah.
Seminole County and stuff like that. Board, if it's okay with you guys, what I'd like to do is meet with Mr. Dufresne, kind of talk to him about this, and maybe it come back up as discussion when we come back out.
Absolutely.
Because there's a lot of stuff that happens inside of our schools that once our staff starts investigating, they're like, well, Johnny knew about it, and it's like, or the teacher knew about it, and it's like, well, why didn't you come forward with that? And I think that those are some of the things that we may need to address and put some teeth behind, making them feel like they have to report things, because our investigations sometimes take too long or something like that because of those kind of things. So
Correct.
I just wanted to say, if it's okay with everybody, if I don't hear any negatives towards that, I'll move forward with it. All right.
Yep.
Anybody else on 8141? All right, next one is 8210, school calendar. Ms. Han, do you want to direct to it, or do you want me just to go to whoever's on here? Human Resources, Mr. Dufresne.
I have nothing to add. The policy is fine as it is.
Okay. Any board member wish to speak to 8210, which is the school calendar?
Yeah, I just had a question. I know that our policy, we have these 6 holidays listed because these are the ones that are incorporated into the contracts.
Correct.
So they are paid holidays.
Correct.
But we do not make people, unless it's an emergency situation, they're on call. We don't make people work on Independence Day or Memorial Day or some of those others that are listed. Would it be appropriate to add those listed separately, that they're like not paid, but they are still holidays? I'm not sure how that works, because even outside, we think teacher contract, right? But we have so
Correct.
many employees that work year round.
Correct.
And we're not making them work on July 4th. It may not be a paid holiday, but how I'm just curious why we didn't include those in there. And then I went back and I'm like, okay, but this is the school year. But Memorial Day sometimes falls within the school year. and it's still a holiday, we're never going to plan a school day on that, but it's not a paid holiday. And I'm not suggesting we make it a paid holiday. But if we're talking about how we do the calendar, should we have it in policy, we're not going to have school on Memorial Day?
Seems that we should look at that.
Okay. That's my only question is, I mean, we've got, the calendar is so dadgum complicated when we have to incorporate all these rules and hours and things like that. But that was the other thing. Not suggesting we make it a paid holiday, but if we're always operate our calendar that way, and like I said, Memorial Day does fall within the school year sometimes, let's make sure it's clear in there, since we don't have that incorporated. I think the only other ones that Neola has that we don't have are ones that specifically fall outside of the school day, like a school year, like Independence Day and Christmas.
You know, sorry.
Yeah, no, it's okay.
What I would ask is that if that has to go to bargaining and all of those other components because of the ramifications of it, if you can check that, and then before moving forward with it, bring it back to us just for conversation, because I have a feeling that there's a reason behind us not adding them before, but Ms. Campbell makes a very good point, and that maybe that's something we need to add. So, we're all good there?
Yeah, and I want to ask a question. Sorry, I'm going to be the person. This will be my first year, obviously, being on the board when the school calendar is being developed. So I want to walk through that process a little bit, and just so that I am familiar with it as well as the public is familiar with it, because we are asked quite frequently, hey, who makes up the calendar? Why do we have to go to, why are hurricane makeup days? And I think just to clear up the perception all the way around, can you share with us how that works?
I cannot, but I'm hoping that Mr.
Uh-oh.
Dufresne
That's a
can.
Mike Alba question.
Yeah, this is a Mike Alba
Whoa.
question, and I
Okay.
could get him in here in about 30 seconds if you wanted to circle back to this.
Okay.
I know that we do take into consideration employee and parent feedback. We're actually building that right
Every
now.
year.
Yes.
It's going to go out, I believe, next week. And then, of course, there's minutes built into each semester that we have to meet. So that's, and Mr. Raymer also has a calendar that that we make sure we're meeting those minutes on each semester, and then, of course, over the year time frame. But to get a detailed explanation, I can grab Mr. Alba.
Okay,
in
and
2
you said
seconds.
something very, very good that I'm kind of leaning towards. So you indicated minutes, and a lot of our calendar is based on days. And so I don't know if that's something that needs to be incorporated into the policy to reflect the amount of minutes that are statutorily required for our students to be in class. That might help with the development process to some degree, if that makes any sense, just so that they're kind of
Yeah,
aligned.
and like I said, Mr. Raymer he built a tool just for that, make sure we're meeting our mandatory minutes.
Minutes, yes.
And
There
what-
is one of our policies that had the minutes specifically. I think we're coming up on it. Oh, it's in the next one.
The next one.
Yeah, the next one has
So-
720 hours and all that.
So Mr. Cheatham has been on the committee, so he could probably speak to it a little bit more eloquently.
Yeah, Mr. Alba, he puts together a pretty robust committee of teachers, members of the union. It's a relatively large committee, but they all come together every year and look at the whole calendar and build it out, and then that comes back to cabinet for review before it comes to you guys. But it's a pretty large committee that comes together and kind of builds that calendar every single year.
And I think there's two things to that Ms. Wright, if I may. They put all that together, and then they come to us prior to it coming to a board workshop or a board meeting. So we give our input at that time, then it comes to us. But I think what Ms. Wright's getting at is that there's also another part of it is you have the scheduled minutes that we have, and then most recently, due to the hurricane makeup, we have a situation where we might be able to shift some of those minutes, meaning that we can come in 5 or 10 minutes earlier on a day to make up the rest of the thing. And there's been some discussion wrapped around that, both with negotiations and stuff like that. So what I may add to that is do we have to put any of that into the policy, or do you feel pretty open about having those adjustments made behind the scenes that you can do that without the policy? Are you handcuffed by the policy?
I don't think I'm handcuffed by
Okay.
the policy. We have a process in place. I think it works fairly well.
Okay. So if we have to make adjustments after a hurricane to add or subtract minutes or add days or whatever, you feel confident in that process that it's addressed here in the policy that we can do that?
Roger that. Like I said, moving forward, I would like to change some of the makeup days that we have on the calendar because there's not an appetite for some of the dates, and so why put them in there if we're not going to use them? So let's identify some dates that everyone agrees to prior to even the school year starting.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
So much, appreciate that.
Ms. Wright, I also just want to jump in there too, because I think you were saying you haven't been here to see. Have you seen anything from Mike Alba yet when it
No.
comes to this? Okay, so it's really visual, and so it'd be, even if he was able to step in here and have a conversation, the public's not going to understand it without those visuals. He has created like the best calendar chart for you to understand how the days move and how it affects it. I don't think it's the worst idea for the public to see it, but you definitely need that visual piece because it's way too complicated. But when he sits down with you, it's like easy peasy.
Yep.
All right, sounds good.
Any other questions on 8210? All right, moving
Halfway
forward.
expecting Mike Alba
Yeah,
to walk in the door.
that's what I was expecting
80,
too.
80, next policy is 8220, school day. Anybody wish to say anything about 8220? No? All right.
Yeah, no, ours, look, even though ours says 2014, when I was looking at it, because it includes the minutes and not the days, I feel like ours is more to date or more accurate to
Okay.
the way that it gets counted.
Yep.
Well, and, sorry. Ms.
No, that's
Ms.
okay.
Bishop.
Go ahead.
Even this isn't it reflects hours, not minutes. And so again, I think just to keep it in line with what the statute says, that it would probably be useful to have it all uniform all the way across the board. An hour is significantly different than a minute, especially when we're looking at early release days. Losing minutes versus losing hours makes a difference.
So with that, anybody else have any other questions? It seems that there was no comments or anything from staff. I think we've given direction on that. Move forward to 8300, continuity of organizational structures plan. Ms. Hand?
Yes, sir. This one is a Neola policy. We do not have this
Oh, okay.
policy in Brevard. So, Mr. Wilson, did you have any observations about this?
No, I don't, other than the fact that we have a handout, a continuity handout that has been updated, last updated in 2020, March 2020. But we do not, as Ms. Hand mentioned, have a policy, but we do have a handout. But if you guys want to take a look at it, you're more than welcome to do so.
Do you feel like you need more than the handout as an administrative procedure?
According to past practices, no, I don't. I think
Okay.
This kind of takes care of it.
I think staff's recommendation is that we pass on this policy because we already have it in place. Is there anybody that wishes to speak for or against that or have comment on it? I'm okay with that. Anybody else okay?
No, I just, as I was reading through this, I was like, I know we have the
Yeah.
co-op because I've seen it and I was on the board that approved it. I'm like, that's when you said that. I'm like, okay. So my question is, and we approved it or we just received, I'm trying to think, because this policy says it'll be
This was,
board approved.
it was approved.
It was approved.
was
So,
approved.
so we're doing it. This, to me, the only purpose for putting this policy was to put in there that we'd want it to be approved or we want it to be reviewed every however often. It probably needs to be updated at some
It
point
does.
because of the changes. We have the new schools and things like that since 2020.
Yep.
But I don't know that we need the policy.
I'm okay with it moving forward without a policy. Everybody else okay with that? Just as long as it comes before us as an administrative procedure and we do that? That's great. All right, next one up is 8305, information security. I'm assuming that this is going to ET, which is Mr. Cheatham. Okay, and you'll bring that back with any kind of modifications. Does anybody wish to speak to 8305, information security? I'm really glad that this one's actually going to be going in.
Yeah, and there were some July updates, so if we can make sure to incorporate those. I noticed in here some, it refers to some definitions in 0100, and I know I found technical resources, but it also refers back to that policy of the definitions policy for info resources, and I didn't find that in there. Maybe we call it something different. So we may need it, if we need to go back and add that definition, or just not put that part of the policy in there. I mean, you know, if we feel like we don't need it. That was all I noticed.
Okay, moving forward, I think we're going to move forward with bringing that back in some sort of way or fashion. Thank you very much, Mr. Cheatham. Moving on to 8310, public records. The recommendation from GCR is to adopt the policy. Mr. Brune, would you like to speak to that?
This policy was last revised in 2011, and since then there's an extended definition of exemptions from public records that I think would be useful. So I would recommend adopting the Neola language, and then also looking at administrative procedures based on that.
All right, any board member wish to speak to this? It looks like we're going to bring this back in some sort of an updated fashion. Anybody wish to speak to this?
Yes. Here we go again, sorry. This is more of a procedure-wise. I think that tightening up the public records request, this is something that I would like to see done within our organization so that we can incorporate maybe a monthly spreadsheet that's sent to each board member to say, hey, these are the outstanding requests that you have on yourself. I probably a month and a half or a month ago, I don't know, I made a request because I thought I had fulfilled all of the public records requests that I had, and there were some on there that I hadn't seen, and that can happen. I know that your public records department is inundated with a lot of requests, so to no fault of their own, but I'm just thinking procedurally, it would be really, really good if we were given a monthly update so that I know, hey, is this something that it's on me? It wasn't fulfilled because I didn't bring in my cell phone or I didn't bring in whatever the case is, or is this something that they're working on behind the scenes? It would help me just so I know that I'm not the one that was holding it up, so to speak, if that makes sense.
I think there's also another thing that we can go to the other layers. So I've asked, I think that there's going to be some significant upgrades inside this public records situation because of some of the inundation that you guys have received, some of the legalities around it and everything else. I've asked our board assistant to Ms. Lena to give us an update as we receive them. Just so you know that the way it works is that if we receive them, when you check in every week, just check in with Lena and say, hey, do we have any outstanding? That way we can check in and say, hey, this is something that we need to address and file for. And sometimes there's public records requests for your personal stuff and everything else. And in that indication, you go home, check it, send the screenshots and all that stuff. But we don't have a process around that yet. And we've developed some things that are kind of not in policy yet. So what I've done is part of the offsite that we have next week is we're going to talk about what our wishes as a board moving forward on some of these things are. So that might be some feedback for you, and then also some of the things you've seen on your end.
So the things like, sounds like what you guys are talking about are things to incorporate in the administrative procedure,
Right,
not the
right, not
policy, but the.
necessarily
Right.
policies.
Right,
Yep,
gotcha.
because we can get it quicker too. All right. With that, we have everybody okay moving forward? All right. 8315 informational management.
Yeah,
That is going to GCR again.
No, that's mine. I
Our
would
general
recommend
counsel,
bringing that back and adopting the Neola version.
Okay. Does anybody wish to speak to informational management? No?
Nope.
All right. Hang on just a second. Okay. This is where it starts getting kind of crazy. All right. 8320 records management is our next policy. That is moving over to GCR. Mr. Broom.
Yeah, on this one, it's basically the name of the state organization that oversees it's been changed, and that language is reflected in the Neola update of the Division of Library and Information Services versus Bureau of Archives and Records Management. So that would be the only change, but we should probably do that since it's the name of the state agency, so we can handle that.
All right. Thank you for doing that. Does anybody else wish to speak to 8320 on records management?
Yeah, yay for easy updates.
All right. And then moving on to 8325, which is a Neola update, goes to HR or General Counsel. Which one should I turn to on this one? I'll go to
Yeah,
Paul since he doesn't have
I'd
it.
recommend looking at it and bringing it back for adoption.
Okay. Does any board member wish to speak to 8325 prior to us moving on?
Yeah, I'd like for you guys to look at it, but just reading through, it seems like it's more descriptive than policy, would be my only reason why I would say we didn't necessarily need it, because it seems like we're going to do this, but it's not really.
Right. It might be more suited for an administrative procedure, but I'd like to dig in a little bit more.
Yeah. No, that sounds good to me.
All right. So Paul's going to look at it and bring it back. Any other questions? None. Moving forward, we have 8330 student records, GCR.
This was updated February of 2022, but there's another update that's pretty lengthy, so I think I want to review this and bring it back and kind of match it up against our current one and mesh them versus just adopting one or the other.
Yeah. No, I like those better doing that. Any board member wish to speak to 8330?
Wasn't this the one that also had a September update
I
ahead of
believe
July
that's
and a
correct,
September,
yes.
adding that threat assessment language, I think, so yes, absolutely.
Absolutely. And just to back up what Ms. Campbell always says is if we could make sure that as we're updating these administrative procedures, they make it to be online and everything else that we have so that people can look at the policies and the administrative procedures. I know you guys are doing it. It's just as long as we can verify that. I want to say it for you, so you didn't have to say it.
Oh, I had.
'Cause you say it
I
in
have
every meeting.
some. I actually only caught one that didn't have an administrative procedure that said it needed to have one.
That's okay. I just wanted to verify.
Thank
wanted
you.
to verify.
I love that you do that, Katie.
They're catching it though, because I think I saw a comment on there. We need to have an administrative procedure. We're like, oh, they're catching it.
All right, moving on to 8340, which is not inside of our policy, letters of reference for disclosure of information regarding former or current employees, human resources. Mr.
Yeah, I'd
Dufresne.
like to take a look at this policy, because we have procedures, but it might need to go into policy, so let me look at the Neola process.
Love it. Okay. Anybody else have any questions to 8340?
No, I'm good with that.
All right. Hearing none, we're going to move on to 8350, confidentiality. This is going to go to GCR. Mr. Broom.
This is another one I'd like to take a look at. They added a couple of references to policies 8310 and 8330 that we are going to look at as well. So I think we need to kind of do all these together. So I'd like to bring this back.
Okay. Any board member wish to speak to 8350, confidentiality?
This was the one that needs an administrative procedure, because it says that we will have one, and I didn't see one on this one.
Okay. Moving on, 8390, animals on district property. We all love the animals that we get to see on a regular basis. This is the policy behind it. This goes to the chief operating officer or the chief of schools. Ms. Handy, wish to talk about this one?
No.
Well, I just thought maybe because of the goats that we have on property, that
Yeah.
that would be
No,
part of
this
the
is not a
policy.
goat
Listen,
policy.
Ms. Campbell,
No,
I'm just throwing out some fun.
Seriously, this is one that sort of straddles several different operational areas of the district. So Mr. Raymer, Mr. Wilson, and I, and our
Student
EHS
services.
Student Services, we'll all be looking at this one together. There's aspects about animals as instructional, in the instructional environment, as well as service animals. And we have all sorts of interesting questions around this policy, so.
It's a
So it
lot of
needs a
moving
little bit of work.
parts. A lot of moving parts to this policy.
I think, just so everybody understands, we love animals up here. So if there's a caution of letting them in or not, we wouldn't mind allowing that.
Yeah, I'm excited about this policy. I'm like, so what you're saying is our schools could have a chicken coop if it's tied to curriculum. That's what I'm hearing when I
Yeah.
look at this.
I like that.
And I think it's pretty exciting.
What
So-
about llamas?
As long as
and
it's
giraffes?
outside, this is right.
Okay, outside chicken coops, say, I'm
Well,
for them.
What about, yeah, and we can have.
See, you guys
joint
are
partnerships with
hilarious
the zoo.
because we're having these conversations about animals, and I remember when we went through this policy before, we were talking about service animals and opening up the door because we didn't have that opportunity. So, and I'm seeing it just as service animals, and we're placing some limits because nowadays, like where my daughter goes to college, you can just say, I need this emotional support cat, and you can take it with you just about anywhere. I don't think we're about to open those doors.
Right.
But so you're talking about, I mean, we already have animals on, well, I mean, where my kids went to school, there were animals all over the place in the science labs and you know, whatever. But so I think, to me, I saw this more as like service animals, you know.
There's a risk element to this as well.
Yeah.
Well, we're not talking about having wolverines on
I'm just-
campus,
I'm
okay?
just-
But I think that if somebody wants to bring a
Little
llama on
4-H in the
campus,
schools
then
would be
that's okay.
probably a good thing.
I think we should encourage joint partnerships with the zoo and anything else that we can get that brings animals, because I truly believe in the economic, or the advancement of our students through having that connection. I've seen so many kids grow as individuals inside of the schools with the, hatching of the eggs or the science projects and stuff like that they do. They identify a connection to those animals. They identify some of the kids that don't have a good home life and everything else. It works. So I think even if the board members wanted to bring a special animal to show at the school board meeting, we should be able to do that too.
Depends on the meeting.
So
What
anyways,
animal we'll bring.
well, there are some animals that show up anyway, but they may be not identified as animals. But all right. So anyways, I think we have some good conversations wrapped around this. I think you guys are having heart palpitations on your end of the
Sorry,
bench.
guys.
But I think that look at Dufresne. He's really
Look, he's
really
giving me the, I got the over the eyeglasses. That's what I do.
I guess I'm just trying to figure out what is it that we want to add that's not already in there, because I feel like it's,
No,
We have a lot in there.
If you look at it to tighten it up, and then we kind of come forward with some of our ideas, I think we can come to
It may be fine as is. I just feel like we'd like an opportunity as a cross-functional group to just kind of look at it all and make sure that everybody's
Yep.
boxes are checked. As Mr. Dufresne is right, there's risk elements with allergies and things like that, as well as just animal misbehavior.
right.
So-
And I think some of that was covered, as I recall, in the administrative procedure
is.
that was developed,
It
as far
is.
as like, even if you have a service animal,
Yep.
who's responsible for cleaning up
Yep.
and all of those kinds of things.
It's
So-
pretty good, but I would like an opportunity for us all to look at it one more time before we declare this done.
Yep.
Okay.
Thanks.
mascots included in that too, Mr. Dufresne.
He's like, his eyes twitching
I'm
right
trying
now,
to
I
give them
think.
as much as we can here. All right, moving on. 8400 environmental health and safety issues. Looks like that's going to be back to facilities. Ms. Ham?
Yes, sir. We updated this in 2020, and it reflects the Neola language, so we're okay with it as is.
Okay. Does any board member wish to speak to this policy?
Nope.
All right, hearing none, we're moving on to 8405, school safety and security threat assessments and teams. This has some large updates. Ms. Han that would speak to, just so you guys know, staff has requested that they take a look at this and then bring something back to us for discussion ahead of time because there's so many moving parts. Go ahead.
We want to refer it to staff. The biggest addition is we need to add the new Florida threat assessment model to the current policy.
Beautiful. And your idea is that you're going to do that, bring it back to us so that we can workshop it
10-4,
and then go from there.
absolutely.
I think there's a lot here that if we have anything offline you want to go bring to them, and if not, we can move on.
Yep,
And this one, can we move this one maybe a little faster
we can.
than, rather than
can.
the other 8,000s? Because some of them can wait.
Yeah.
I think we
Yep,
probably
we
need to
can.
move this one quicker.
I would say this would be as important as the animal one, too. 8406.
Oh, my goodness, I'm going to ignore that.
8406, moving on. Reports of suspicious activity and potential threats to schools, facilities, students, and employees. This is going to end up going to the Chief Operating Officer, which is Ms. Han. Ms. Han, do you wish to speak to it?
Mr. Wilson?
Mr. Wilson.
Oh, okay, go ahead, Mr.
I
Wilson.
mean, she can have it. I mean,
No.
this policy was last updated in 2020, and we reviewed it, and we feel that it is okay as is, and it does reflect the Neola language.
Okay, any board member wish to speak to this? All right, hearing none, we're moving on to 8407, Safe School Officers. This is to our Chief of Schools
Yep.
again.
Also, okay as is, updated in 2022, and it does reflect the Neola language.
All right, rolling to anybody wish to speak to that? Hearing none, moving to the next one. Mr. Wilson, 8410.
Yes.
Oh, Ms. Stampierre.
That's student services.
It's hard
Okay.
when this thing's kind of bent and I'm
This-
going.
This policy was last revised in June 2020. We recommend it's current, that it reflects all of the Neola language, no changes.
And there seems to be something of a change to the administrative procedure. Seems odd and unnecessary. You're going to take a look at those and kind of bring those back.
Yes, for the administrative procedures, we will need to update that. That wasn't updated at the time.
Okay. Any board member wish to speak to 8410? Hearing none, we're going to move on to critical incident response. Chief Operating Officer, Mr. Wilson.
All right, last updated 2020. We reviewed it, and it is okay as is, and it does reflect the Neola language.
One of the things I noticed is that the overall kind of critical incident response is, you know what I mean? Do we have administrative procedures that kind of goes into depth over what that critical incident response looks like? Because we have some policies in the back that kind of talk to some more of that, but is there something that we have? Just wanted to make sure that if there is, that we have that backed up to the policy and everything else, that's all. It's just that you don't have to dig through it.
Yeah, we don't have an administrative procedure specifically for this one. That
As
was
long
a-
as it's defined, there's some others policies throughout
Right.
that speak to that we're about to get into.
Correct.
But as long as we have some sort of a place that we can all go to for those critical incident responses, that'd be great. And I know that there's some security wrapped around that, so sometimes that's not public knowledge. But I did just want to kind of go through that.
I
Anybody
think
else have any discussion?
8420, I think captures what you're
Yep.
talking about.
Just want to point out, I mean, you may just feel like it doesn't need to be in there, but there is an update in July for that one,
For the choking.
for the choking in the cafeteria.
Yeah, and that's taken care of through food service, another policy.
Yeah, it was a little thing, like you have to put a choking poster up in the cafeteria.
Yep.
So that was the one.
And that's
thing
going to
was-
be addressed in the food services part of
Okay,
the
when we get there. All
policies,
right.
correct.
Other than that, I think ours is better than the one that Neola presented because it's specific to the
That's what we-
CEOP and all
We
that.
thought the same.
Okay, next one up is 8415, Emergency Crisis Management.
Well, sorry, do we want to skip the 8410, the early warning signs of violence? That's not a policy that we have.
I think we just did that one.
Sorry, is that what
We
we're
did-
talking about?
we
Am I
did just
missing
do
it?
Yeah, we were just
8410.01, that's one we just did.
critical, so we did 8410.
Okay,
Crisis intervention,
Right.
early warning signs. Those are all administrative
Sorry, I
procedures.
got 18 mixed up now. Sorry.
And then we did 84.01, which is critical incident response. That's
I
what we just
apologize.
spoke about.
That's my fault.
That's okay.
Yeah.
And then now we're on to 8415, which is not one of our policies, but we're going to ask finance to tell us about it.
Ms. Lisinski isn't here yet. She asked that we just refer this one to staff for review. and
So you
we'll-
want to refer it
we'll-
to staff?
Yep, we'll
Okay.
bring that back for you.
So that's a new policy that staff wants to take a look at. Are you guys okay with that? Anybody wish to say anything to it? Hearing none, we can move on to 8420, Emergency Management emergency preparedness and emergency response agencies. Mr. Wilson?
After our review, we feel that this policy is okay as is. It was last updated on 2020, and it does reflect the Neola language.
Okay.
Okay, I would like us to go back and look at this one again because I don't think ours includes the Alyssa's Law section. Unless we've got it some other way, because we did, are we looking at 8420?
Yeah.
Okay, so I have, we did it in 2020. There was an update in 2022, and I think that was the Alyssa's Law section. And we are complying, but we don't have that section in there. So if that would be my question, because when I was looking through what we were missing, we don't have anything about that. So can we just check that one again? I'd like for them to just take one more look.
Absolutely. I think that that would be something that we can add to it. Does any
We'll
other
check.
board member? Any other, and if you can provide that information to Mr. Wilson. if
Yeah,
that-
it
I
was
think
in
seems
the
like he's got it.
Neola. It was
Yep.
in the Neola, but it just, that one section of the Alyssa's alert.
Good job. Anybody else wish to speak to anything here? I actually have something that I wanted to speak to. One of the things that we have that keeps coming up is our AED devices throughout, and identifying a system where all of our members of our school districts, employees know where the AEDs are, and then also know how to utilize each one of them is a massive opportunity for us. And it's not identified inside of this emergency management. And I want to tell everybody a little bit of a story to where this comes true. So at Vieira High School, a couple of years ago, a student went down, and the first thing that happened was they called the fire department, and first off, they called out for the AED, and they thought that the school thought that they were calling for the AD. So the athletic director ran out there. So there was a ROTC instructor, Tim Thomas, that literally pumped the kid for almost 2 minutes while all this was going on. Then once the AD came, realized what it was, they screamed and sent for the AED. At the same time, where they were at and located at, the fire department did not know how to get back there with the chains, so they were delayed in getting there. So what ended up happening is that by the time they got there, it was almost 2.5 minutes. They shocked him, brought him into stabilization. He went to the hospital where overnight I was over there. He went out like 4 or 5 times, and they brought him back. It was this whole thing. The kid ended up living, much to the credit of Tim Thomas. But what I made a promise at that point, I don't know if we do it now, is that we would identify where the location of every AED is, how we can educate each member on where that is, and how the AED is used. They're very easy to understand. It's a very quick thing, but I think that it causes pause when somebody's never seen it to actually implement it. Now, do we have anything like that in place, Mr. Wilson? And if not,
8452.
Yeah, we're coming up on an eight.
Coming up on that one, I think that's chief of schools, if I'm not mistaken, but not to my knowledge.
Okay.
Not to my knowledge, Chair. We'll definitely look into it.
so if we, and I can have Sean Sema come back, and he gives the greatest speeches, so it might even just be worth letting him come in because he gives these great speeches. But he is adamantly, this is something that he requested, that having our agencies know when they come on campus, where the gates are at and everything else is something that we do with them, I think, at the beginning of the year. But then they have different shifts and they have different stuff, and you know what I mean? So sometimes it comes off somewhere in there that we know for a fact that when this happens, this is where it is. That's all.
I know in my experiences as a building level administrator that the municipalities had clear access to our campus and knew.
Yeah.
We shared our floor plans with them, and we
Yep.
went over that as a part of the drill process.
Yep.
So that should be in place, but let me take a look. And,
Yeah, if there's
and get
some,
with Mr. Raymer so we can make sure.
and instead of us just saying we know it's in place, as long as there's a procedure where we check it to where we know that somebody verified it and that it's done. And if it's okay with everybody, because I'm speaking without the majority right now, but I would like to see if you guys have anything. I would like to have our staff trained on where they are and know how to use them. Does that make sense?
So part of 8452 that we adopted just last year incorporates where they are, and I think maybe the difference from what if I'm hearing you right, from what you're saying and what the policy says is everybody who would be reasonably expected to use them, so coaches, admin, athletic directors, any of the trainers, all those things must be trained. So I think what I'm hearing you saying you wanted to add is just that there's a broader awareness of where they're located. I would say maybe front office staff, because they're usually the ones, that would know in addition, because we want our local firefighters and emergency responders to to know where they are, but if it's a new person or whatever, that there should be, besides just athletic director, anybody they may come across in the front office or on their way to, so. maybe a
Anybody at the
broader-
school, my opinion is that anybody that's a school employee at that location should know where all the AEDs are and be trained for it. That's basically what I'm saying. And I think there's multiple other ones that have occurred. I just had a personal example of what happened there. And Sean had mentioned this, and he said that. So does that help you?
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with you as far as the knowledge of where it is. I don't know that I would want to take the step of making sure that every staff member on a school campus is trained in how to use it, because that is maybe a greater ask.
Okay, well, if I
know-
could speak to that, it takes 5 minutes to show them at a faculty meeting on how to utilize the thing. It takes, you open it up and everything else. We also do, CPR and stuff like that. If you're saying that you do not want them to be trained on this AED, I'm very adamant about having our staff trained in some way. If we need to have a board majority, I understand that to move forward. What are you saying?
Well, I'm not fighting. Be careful. I'm not fighting. I'm trying to be careful because I'm not fighting you on the importance of them. But once everybody gets trained, and there is an expectation that if an event happens in front of you, then you will be one of the people. To me, once you're trained, you'll be one of the people who will be expected to do it, and that's kind of scary, to be honest. And maybe it's my ignorance of exactly how they work and how simple it would be to use them. But it's a little intimidating to think that any employee, including a cafeteria baker, is now going to go through the training, and then if it happens in front of them, they'll be responsible for going and getting it and on operating if they're the one who's there.
And what I would say back to that is that part of the fear is not knowing how to utilize it. But if a student is sitting there passing in front of somebody and they're fearful on using the AED, then we need to make sure that they know what that AED is doing and that they're trained to do so. I would rather have the fear of them not doing it not because they didn't know how to use it and watching one of our students pass in front of them. There's multiple other instances. There, Coach Woods at Cocoa that went down, and they had a situation where they were trying to find the AED. There's a bunch of them that occurred, and this would help in multiple areas. So that's why I'm passionate about it. I'm sorry if I
Well,
seem
those
like
are two
I'm-
knowing where it is and who's going to be responsible to use it. Those are two different issues. And I
Ms. Campbell, I would like to move forward with training every employee on AEDs and understanding how they do it. That's what I would like to do, and I would like to get board majority to move forward with that if I needed to. If you're not in favor of that, or at least looking at that as an option as far as a policy, so that we can understand. We have bus drivers. We have everybody that needs to know how to utilize CPR and AEDs. Is there anybody else that wishes to talk to this?
I would love to speak to it.
I would like to too. I don't believe that we CPR train every single staff member on our campus, so I don't think that's an accurate statement. But I do have a legality question though, because within the policy already, staff members who do attend to a victim are shielded from anything legal. If something goes wrong, they're shielded. They have immunity, but it doesn't say the opposite. So just a legal question. If it does get to the point where everyone is trained and then they don't react, but we know that they're all trained because we put that in place, what's their liability there?
I'd have to review the statutory language to weigh in on whether they just didn't provide it for anyone who doesn't. Nor generally, you don't have an obligation to act. All right, so under the law, you don't have an obligation to put yourself in that position. But once you start, you can't abandon your assistance. So like if someone's in a car underwater, once you start into the water, you can't back out because other people may see you acting and not act themselves. So now you've taken on that burden. That's why those shield laws are there. So that's the general law, but I don't know off the top of my head what Florida statute says, so I'd want to review it.
Okay, that would just be my one major concern is if we start putting liability on our staff members because they're trained for something that they're definitely not going to be comfortable with. I don't want to do that to our employees. And then of course my question would just be, what does it look like? Is it really that quick? Is it that simple to just do in a training during PD or something like that? I just want to know what the answer is to that. Thanks.
I would
Ms.
love
Camp,
to
Ms.
speak
Wright.
to this if it's possible. So as somebody who goes through CPR and AED training every 2 years, I don't know if every AED machine is the same, but I will tell you, everyone that I've ever been trained on, it walks you through the process. It tells you, now take the pads, place them on the side. I mean, it literally tells you exactly what to do. So the good news is, I feel like any of our staff would jump in the event that a child went down. They're going to immediately react and try to help that child. I don't really see any harm in training them on this because, again, the machine tells you what to do and there's a level of comfort there, and it'll tell you, okay, are the pads placed? I mean, it literally very calmly walks it through and tells you to press the button, and then to step back. I mean, it's very, very user-friendly in the event. I think it would be extremely beneficial for us at the district to notify, maybe that's something a principal can do, to say, hey, we have an AED machine on site. It is located here. These are the individuals that are trained on how to use it. And then a list, just so that staff knows that. I can see both sides of this because I understand what you're saying, Ms. Jenkins, on the concern as far as the liability. But I'm gonna tell you right now, I don't think any of our staff would hesitate for 1 second to jump in if a child needed CPR or an AED administered to them, or staff. I think they would do what was necessary. So again, to be trained on it, I don't see the harm in the training. It doesn't mean that you have to do it because you're trained on it.
But it gives you the opportunity.
It gives you the opportunity, and you would feel a level of comfort knowing, hey, I've been trained on this and I know how to do it. So that's the only thing
Yeah.
I'm thinking.
Mr. Trent, hang on, Mr. Trent.
Well, I would just add, as a former coach and being trained, I often wondered why everyone isn't at least exposed to this training. If you're looking for a support, it's there.
So I would just suggest that rather than us making a statement, as a board right now, that we are going to do this, that we, like we've done with these other policies, let's refer this to staff and let them, rather than us making the reaction right now in the moment, have some time to think through and look at what it might look like. To add that to policy in 8452 or administrative procedure that's attached to 8452. But let them, because we do have an administrative procedure for that.
And
Let them take a look at that.
I think the recommendation is that the majority of the board wants to move forward with training them and finding a way to find the locations and train them where that is. And what staff should do is come back with a recommendation, unless there's some sort of a strong legal argument, that they come back with a recommendation to train them and to have the AEDs located inside those locations. I think that's the direction that I think we're all comfortable with, that unless there's something strong legally that we would not want to train them, that is what it is. So I think if that's good on the direction that you guys are okay with, that's what I'm hearing.
So I just want to reiterate, I'm not saying that there'll be a legal reason not to train them. I'm saying if this is going to happen, that we need to be aware as staff that it needs to be clearly stated in the policy, because it says the opposite in the policy for you're immune if you act and something goes wrong. So if we are training people and legally it is the opposite, then we have to make sure it's clearly stated in our policy for our staff members to see.
And
That was not, for me, not an excuse not to train people. I want to be hyper aware of that because it would be a very opposite. And Ms. Wright, I agree with you. I don't think the majority of people wouldn't respond, but it happens. It happened in Parkland. And unfortunately, it could happen because people are people, and sometimes you freeze and you panic. And so, again, because if we put that burden on our staff, they need to see it in writing. That's all I'm saying.
And I would remind everybody in this argument that coaches are already trained, and we already have staff that is already trained, that already knows where the AEDs are and already knows what the functions are. So with that, I think you guys have direction, and if you need any help on that direction, I can always fill it in. So,
We got it. Thank you.
I will work with Mr. Raymer. This policy lies in him, but I will work with him and see
Thank
this
you.
come to fruition.
All right, moving on to 84. I think this is, let me get here. Yep,
we want to go back to 8420?
8420.01, lightning safety and outdoor activities.
Yes.
This is going to be Ms. Suhan.
I'll take that. We're actually working on that right now, so we
Yeah.
believe we do need to do some serious updates, to,
I
not
saw-
necessarily to the
I
policy.
saw Neola was
but
like
the-
2007.
Yeah, and just as a practical matter, technology has moved on, and we were talking about expanding our lightning protection has been sort of oriented into the sports world, but really we need to have a little broader perspective on it. So we actually met on that yesterday, so we're working on this one.
Can I add something just real fast on this one? I think it would be very wise for the district to maybe set a mile radius of where lightning strikes are, and that be our measuring, because sometimes when this gets left up to interpretation, if you hear it, they're like, oh, there's lightning out there. So if we're saying, hey, if lightning is striking within XYZ number of miles, and you can look on any, there's tons of apps that do this, that would help at least give clear directions so that the staff knows, oh, we looked and it's only 3 miles, and our policy says that it needs to be more than 5 miles, or whatever the case is.
I think it's 30 miles is what it is. There's a very conservative state statute regulated.
30 miles is not.
It's, no, it's crazy.
I think it's 10.
It's 10?
It's 10.
Because when we started doing this in like 2008, they paid money to put them all across the school district. I remember, oh no, it's 30 minutes of waiting after
30
a 10
minutes.
mile
30 minutes.
strike.
30 minutes
30
after
miles,
the
we're
last
like in a
strike.
whole nother county
10
in
miles.
30 miles.
That's it, 30 minutes on the 10 miles. So,
FHSA
yeah.
has a pretty strong policy on that
Yeah,
as well.
and that's what I had here was, when I had inside my notes, I had that if there's a way, we're always, and maybe it's not appropriate, but there are some FHSAA guidelines that we may or may not want to cite inside of here because they reference, you know what I mean? But the question is that if a participating school is not part of FHSAA, then we do need a policy to be over the top, because we have some that say they don't want to be a part of it. So that doesn't mean that they don't have to follow the lightning procedures,
Right.
right? So,
Correct.
thank you. So I think you got where you're going to go.
And
Oh,
this,
I'm sorry, Ms.
the
Campbell.
Neola policy with the same number has to do with epidemics and pandemics, so do we need to just go ahead and change the number while we're at it so that we're not in conflict? I don't know if Neola even has a lightning recommendation policy. I didn't see one.
Didn't either, so we'll check all that as we're updating.
Okay, and as far as the Neola epidemics and pandemics one, I don't know that we need to add that. I don't know if you guys looked at that. We have a plan. I was looking, we do not have the word epidemic or pandemic anywhere in our policy book, but I know that I think those are part of our plan, Mr. Wilson, the co-op or the plan. I want to say there's something in there.
Continuity plan?
Yeah,
So,
it may be in there. It's somewhere, but I don't, board, we kind of need to decide, do we want to adopt as a separate number besides lightning, the epidemics and pandemics?
So what Ms. Campbell is referring to is, if you guys pull your Neola updates, 8420.01, and I'm coming down to it, refers to a completely separate policy. And if you guys needed to get there for a second, we can take a minute. And it's considered epidemics and pandemics. And what Ms. Campbell, if I could give you an opportunity, I just wanted to reference it, if you could kind of restate.
Yeah,
what we were
I don't
trying to do.
necessarily think we need it, but I'm saying but we need to make a decision because
Right.
that is a policy.
It's a very good point.
I mean, we do, when we've had, I mean, we're all thinking about COVID, but this was actually in place a long time ago. I'm thinking about the year we had was it the bird flu or the swine flu or one going around years ago. I don't know that we put together an epidemic response team to that level. We certainly have that this time around. But I mean, if we feel like we need it, it's a separate
Yep.
policy. We just need to make a call.
Does any board member wish to speak on, I think Ms. Campbell has a good point, that we either add this or not. I don't think we need it, but it's up to you guys if we do.
I would love to be done with epidemics and pandemics. I mean, I guess I would like to hear what everyone's thoughts are on this before I make a decision one or the other. So, Ms. Campbell, are you in favor of adding it? Are you thinking, or you're just wanting to?
I don't know.
I can speak to
I
it.
think
Yeah, I feel the
the
same
people,
way. I'm like-
people across the wall of space in between, you probably need to take a look and just see. To me, this is just saying if something happens, then this is going to be our response. The response is going to include getting the team together, getting the plan together. If these types of plans are already incorporated into other procedures that we have as far as continuity plans and things like that, like I said, we're all thinking of COVID, but this policy was originally, never mind, it was adopted in 2020. So the Neola version, they're putting the date that we adopted, which is a lightning policy. So I don't know.
I would say if it's incorporated somewhere else, then it's not needed. But if it's
Yeah.
not,
Got a jumper.
if it's not, I think it would be smart to put it in place because we've learned over the past 2.5 years best practices And so if this was to happen 4 to 6 years from now, it would be really smart to have the best practices already written down so that a whole new, potentially crew of people doesn't have to flounder and figure that out themselves. Because I remember what that was like, and that was pure chaos. I mean, hopefully that'll never happen again, but I'm sure it's written somewhere. But if we could confirm that it's somewhere, at least for referencing points, that would be great.
I think you make a good point, Ms. Jenkins. We have response teams to hurricanes, to the pandemics, to, you know what I mean, little things that happen inside of our schools and stuff like that. The staff, I guess the question is does staff need us to create something, or do you wish to put something, or how do you want to do this?
Our COP
Contains that.
contains a lot of this information as well
Perfect.
as our continuity plans.
Perfect. So I think
Okay.
the staff is saying that COP may have it. Are you okay with not entertaining this?
I am okay with not entertaining.
Okay, next one up is 8420.02, protective face coverings. This was repealed in April of 2023. I don't think there's anybody here that wishes to move forward with adding this.
Nope.
Hearing none, moving on. 8431, preparedness for toxic hazard and asbestos hazard. Ms. Han?
Yeah, we believe we're practicing the Neola policy as a practical matter, but we want to just take a look and make sure we're not missing anything. So I'd like to have this referred to staff for a further review.
Okay. All right. Does any board member wish to speak to this?
No, I'm good with that.
Hearing none, moving on to 8442, reporting accidents, incidences. Ms. Lisinski's not here right now.
Mrs. Lisinski is here.
Oh, she got here.
Oh, great. There she has.
Hey, Ms. Lisinski, I'm so sorry. Been buried
Didn't
into
you
my
want a seat
books.
at
If
the
you want to
table?
grab a seat and kind of tell us what you want to do here.
actually gonna get
Because
up.
you've got, I think this is the only one you've got left.
Mr. Dufresne's exiting
the end.
happily.
Come join us.
Well, you got a couple more coming here, Dufresne, so just so you know.
I don't think he does.
He does. He's got student services, HR. I see HR. Sound like an harassment.
Currently, this is under review, and I want to take a,
Okay. So what I'm hearing is staff wants to take this under review. Does anybody wish to add any comments to this?
So it looks like we have version 1, and I don't see any new things. So as long as they're good with it, unless I see something I really want to add, I'm good with just marking this one as reviewed.
Okay. Anybody else? Where my concern is, Ms. Lisinski, is what we've kind of implemented inside of our discipline policies is that there's some sort of a hook that we have, like when there's an accident that's related to like a teacher being bitten, chewed, hit, whatever that is, that correlates back to our discipline. And then also if there's a student that is injured, that there's a formal, you know what I mean, a check to say, hey, did this student get injured from another student, and does that need to have some sort of discipline? It's kind of the alignment of our data that that we went through and we've been putting together through our discipline. But there needs to be that check that, you know what I mean? You get a workers' comp case that says that a teacher has been hit in the face, right, by a student. That's great. That's one thing for your department to work on the workers' comp and everything else. But that other component needs to go back and over to student services that says, hey, let's make sure that that was followed up with a disciplinary action. That's all. Does that make sense?
It
That was
does.
my concern. We spoke about that last week, and thank you so much for your amazing presentation on the data that you did for me the other day. Do you want to talk to it at all, or you don't have to?
Okay. Yes, we did have an opportunity, and we will be bringing that information to the board. We will be doing a discipline update that will include all the data for the first 9 weeks. We are looking at a process, and Mr. Reed and I haven't had a chance to get with finance in reference to a way of how we can make sure that our employees have been given the opportunity to complete a referral. That it's not, if they get hurt, they choose not to, or they choose to make sure our data is correct. Because a lot of times our employees choose not to because they're like, oh, Johnny hit, But it could turn into something. We want our employees, if they get hurt on the job, to report that as a workers' comp, no matter what, because the next day it could turn into something major. So we're going to be looking at how we can make sure that it's wrapped around where we can get clear data as to whether or not they chose to, yes or no, or, that they did complete a referral. So we have clean data.
And then there's the question that whether the teacher wishes to push forward and make a statement, or if they don't, that there still needs to be disciplinary action,
Yes.
right? Because
Yes.
sometimes the teacher may feel like they're not supposed to based on other, that's all. So I think there's some other conversations wrapped around that.
And that's also a training issue with our principals. We want to make sure that we're on the LTM agenda every month, and the topic is discipline. We'll make sure that we add that and make, as a part of our presentation, that we really want to make sure our employees know that they can write a referral, and if they feel like they're injured, that they write a referral, that we want to get clean data in order to be able to determine whether or not students were given a consequence
Okay.
or not.
Go ahead, Ms. Campbell.
I was just gonna say, there's still going to be the possibility of a gap between workers' comp incidents, even that involve students, and discipline, not just the gap of did they write a referral or not, but a student who that behavior is determined to be a manifestation of their disability, that's not necessarily going to be reported as a discipline referral. And I mean, we just saw some of those yesterday, the possibilities. There's still, it's not going to be every incident of an employee getting hurt by a student. It's not necessarily going to equate to a discipline action or even one that was just refused. I mean, some right? Am I tracking?
And just so you know, it was just in our LTP. We did a lot of training with our principals and our administrators on the MDR process. We revamped a lot of the forms, the processes, just to make sure that there was a clear understanding. And we just released those updates, which are supposed to take place in October, to make sure we're using the new forms. So there's going to be continuous training as well. That is a part of the agenda as well, to make sure we have a clear understanding of the MDR process, what should take place. But even if it's not a manifestation of the student's disability, we have documentation,
Right.
whether it was or not.
Right.
And so, and I think that's exactly some sort of documentation that says that if a teacher was, and it was on there when we were going over it, by the way, Mr. Reed has put together phenomenal
Yeah.
data points. They're grabbing exactly what RSN was requesting. You're going to be very happy with what we saw. But the argument is that if a teacher's inflicted an injury based upon a student, that we then have, okay, it was or was not a student with disabilities or ESC. That was a column.
Yes.
And then if so, that was because it was not, but we have to have documentation supporting that. That's all.
Absolutely.
And you were already in that process of figuring out how to do that and identifying that. And I wanted to say thank you, Ms. Dampier. I really
That's the
appreciate
team,
it.
my
Yeah.
team. They're doing a
Well,
wonderful job.
Yeah. And your guidance and leadership also in there. So anybody else wish to speak to this policy? All right. Hearing none, we move on from 8442 to 8450, control of casual contact communicable diseases. Let me do this. This is going to go to student services or HR.
Currently, we do not have this policy at 8450. The last revision was in 2015 by Neola. We do not have it. Want to get the board's recommendation on whether or not they want us to add it. We can add portions of this. However, there is a section at the bottom of it that talks about the procedures, outline specific procedures. And if you look at that statute, Florida Statute 381.00315, it also talks about quarantining and isolation. So we wanted to get the board's direction onto, we can add the first part, but the bottom part is more of procedures.
Yep.
So if we add it, my recommendation would be to add the policy, but not to include the procedures at the bottom, because that could change. It's constantly changing based on the CDC, based on,
Mr. HR came up. You wish to
She nailed it. Yep.
So I'm just on the plain reading of the policy.
Yes, ma'am.
I'm looking down in which paragraph? the second kind of bigger paragraph under the list. If a student exhibits symptoms of a communicable disease, then the principal will isolate the student in the building, contact the school nurse, attempt to contact the parents. Isolation means the separation of a student, reasonably believe, whatever, in order to not, okay. Then they will, I'm just wondering, what does that look like on the school level? Because if you are, a kid who has severe allergies and it looks like you have a communicable disease, are we saying, because we kind of did that through the COVID, and this is pre-COVID, this is not related to COVID, but but that kind of more was heightened the awareness. What is that going to look like if we're putting this in there?
We're currently following procedures, say for instance, from the Department of Health, if there's any type of outbreak and a student, we follow the direction of the Department of Health. They give us direction, we have letters, we of course communicate with the board, the superintendent, all of that is followed. So it's not any different practice than what we're doing, except, it's in policy that we, follow these procedures. We're currently doing it without this policy, so.
And you feel that if we have a policy in place, it may handcuff some of the procedures and stuff like that. So maybe it is that because it's an ever-changing environment, your recommendation is to leave this alone moving forward. I totally understand you and agree with you. Any board member wish to speak to this item?
Yeah, I feel like I think having a policy for this is really specific and restrictive for no reason, because these aren't common things. So these are things that the community is going to be identified if there's an outbreak of whooping cough going around. The schools are going to be notified by the Department of Health, and they're going to understand the signs and symptoms to look for. So I don't think we need this in a policy.
Yep, I think that's good direction. We're good. We're not going to include this one. Moving on to 8452, automated external defibrillators, talks a little bit about what we spoke about. This is going to go to the chief of schools. He's requesting to refer to staff. You want to speak to it? You want it just to go back to you?
Yeah, we'll take this.
He doesn't have to come. You don't have to come up. I think
We've
this is
got
the
it.
only one.
We've got it.
You got
This
it.
is a
Yep.
cross-functional
Yep.
one, so
Okay.
we've got it.
All right. So everybody, does any board member wish to speak to this? I think we understand it. All right, moving on.
I would like to add something. So
Okay.
it sounds like we're going to do this, which is great. Save lives any way we possibly can. But and it sounds like it's really super simple and fast. So if we do this, in order to continuously spread awareness, if it's that simple and fast, like we should be doing it where people can see it. It sounds like most of you are trained on this already. So me and Ms. Campbell and some of our staff. I think it would be great to spread awareness if it really is that fast and simple. It might encourage more people to do it outside
Does this sound like
of the school system.
a challenge for the board to get CPR and AED certified?
Yeah, no, I would.
I don't know where
Really.
the thing
I mean,
is
if
in
it's
this building,
if it's that simple, I would like to. I'm not CPR trained either.
Oh, I've been CPR. You haven't been CPR trained? Teacher? Oh, well. in
I think
other
if right
states,
now we were asked where the AED is here in this building, we would struggle to try to know where that is.
Well, I would.
And I think, I understand, but the thing is that on top of that, you may not be around when it happens. The thing is that I think it's definitely worth it. Thank you. That was something that I was thinking of is you may have the PTO parents, you may have the booster club, you know what I mean? They should all be a part of knowledge of where these things are. And I know that it's new statutory law that carries the AED out onto the sports fields and stuff like that, but there's a lot of stuff that happens after school, robotics, all of that stuff that those people those sponsors may need to be a part of. So thank you. All right, moving on to the next one, which is 8453, direct communicable diseases, student services.
Okay, the last, this policy was revised in April 2008. And we made some slight revisions to the policy back then. We recommend no changes. It currently reflects the Neola language, the most current.
Okay, and it seems that
However, with the administrative procedures, we want to take a look at that to make sure it's updated with the most current procedures and guidelines. And that's for the AP for 8453.
Thank you for that. Any board member wish to speak to this item? I always enjoyed as a teacher taking some of these screens and signing off that we knew about it and everything else. It's part of that thing. So thank you, Ms. Dampierre. Moving on to 8453.01, control of bloodborne pathogens. Ms. Facilities to Ms. Han.
Yep, we just want to take a look at that with Mr. Raymer.
Perfect. Does any board member wish to speak to that item?
Nope.
Hearing none, moving on. 8462, student abuse and neglect. That's Ms. Student Services, Ms. Napier.
The last time this policy was revised was on April 2007. I recommend that we have staff review it just to make sure we're up to date with Neola language as well as the procedures. So we're going to bring that back.
Okay. Any board member wish to speak to the student abuse and neglect? Hearing none, moving on. 8470, community notification of registered sexual predators / sex offenders. Chief Operating Officer, Mr. Wilson.
Yes, this policy was last updated in 2008, as well as the Neola update. And we're going to refer it to staff because we need to add the Raptor aspect
Yeah.
to this language, which is currently not in there. So we're going to refer it to staff and bring it back.
Okay. Any board member wish to speak to this item?
Nope.
Hearing none, moving on. 8475, criminal background and employment of non-district personnel. Chief Operating Officer, Mr. Wilson.
Absolutely. This was updated in 2021. We reviewed it, and the procedure was updated in 23. And we feel that it is okay as is.
This one had a July update, so have we checked that? Because it had a from Neola.
We did.
Okay, so we're still good, okay.
I have a question about this one, if it's okay. So one of the things, and this gets brought up a couple times, it's been brought up a couple times to me with applicants that have applied for a job, and it asks if you have been arrested versus if you have been charged. And so apparently the district stance is if you have been arrested and it's almost as though you're convicting the person if they were arrested but not charged when it comes to employment. And so is that something that we should look at changing? Because again, you might have somebody who was wrongfully arrested. It could be something that is thrown out 100%. They're not convicted of it. And I know I'm going in the weeds right now, and I see Major Klein behind going, what is she saying? What is she doing?
No,
It has become a problem a couple times. People have come to me and said, I was disqualified because I was arrested. I never was charged with it. And I'm like, what? Like, how are
Is that
you?
for volunteers or for employees? Because we changed that recently.
Yeah, and they can appeal it too.
Yeah, I just don't. know if
Okay,
anybody
so
ever gets
don't,
an appeal.
is that the best policy is to
Yeah,
leave it
and
like it is?
there's a whole document too, Ms. Wright. So if they say, yes, I was arrested, and then they have to describe it, traditionally you'd say, there was no charges pressed or whatever. But also it depends on what it was for, if there's a timeline for it. But if they accidentally answer the question wrong and then they get denied, or they say yes and it wasn't applicable, they have the right to appeal it. Because I think, didn't we address that recently with the staff too? There was like the appeal wasn't clear.
Correct.
Okay,
That's
leave it
what
like
we
it
dealt
is.
with. When
All right.
I first
Got
got
it.
on board, we dealt with that situation. Correct.
Okay.
Just out of curiosity, how many appeals do we see on a regular basis? I don't think we've ever seen one.
Yeah.
One of the
I've seen one since I've been here.
and what I would say is that to Miss Wright's back is I'm not sure if the individuals that are applying that get that rejection know that they have the opportunity to appeal that. I know, but it's pretty emotional when somebody gets rejected. You know what I mean? So I don't know if that because I've received many of these calls. I've said that you have to go ahead and do that, and there's a whole thing where they're like, yeah, but I just don't feel like they feel like it's like they feel dirty, and they're like, oh, I don't want to do. You know
Well,
what
it's
I mean?
embarrassing. I mean,
It is,
obviously. So.
right.
But it's very confidential. Those things aren't subject to public record. I mean, the people who see them are the people who have to see them, which basically is district security. And it's my understanding that the flags that come up are the people who did not report it, but then those incidents come up on the background check. So it's just about reporting it. So all of that, I feel like we're good.
I
Okay.
might go look at the.
If the board feels like that's okay, then I say
Go
keep
ahead,
it on
Mr.
the way it
Trent.
is.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think I'm going to go meet with Klein and see if there's an opportunity for me to take a look at that. because
Probably
I
gonna
think
go,
there's-
what are you doing?
There's some stuff. So, all right, moving on. 8500 food services.
Okay as is, and it was updated in 2021.
Okay. Any board member wish to speak to the food services? All right. 8510 wellness.
Okay as is, last updated 2022, and there's a short policy with procedures booked to support the policy.
Anybody wish to speak to this? Hearing none, moving on. 8531, free and reduced priced meals. Mr. Wilson?
We feel that no policy is needed. 8500 covers the National School Lunch and Breakfast Program with application process addressed.
Okay.
Okay.
Any board member wish to speak to 8531? Hearing none, moving on. 8540, vending machines. Mr. Wilson?
Okay, we feel that this BPS policy is not needed. Student access to vending machines are controlled by FNS with only these machines being utilized.
How does that, and I know that I did not prepare you for this question, Mr. Wilson, and if you are not
That's
sure,
why
I can always come.
I have Kevin back here with me too, so we're good.
Question is in the vending machines. I remember when I first came on as a teacher, we used to have sole sourced to Pepsi. We allowed sodas to be sold. Now we've gotten rid of that because of the health issues with that. How does the revenue go towards those vending machines? Does that go back to the school location or does it come back to the district? And how does that work?
It's a pass-through to me, back to the school, so everything goes right back. So in order for it to be, for us to give it back, it just needs to pass through me, back to the school, so it's a straight pass-through.
And is that vending machines set up on a contract to a vending machine services that we like look at every year, or how does that work?
It's a 3-year contract with 2 renewals. We're in the last of the renewals right now.
Okay.
Rebidding it at the end of summer.
So somebody comes forward, says we have all of these and we can offer this and stuff like
It's
that.
Spark Snacks approved, so it's only healthy snacks.
Yep.
So it meets the criteria of all food being available on campus throughout the school day.
Okay.
So it is very specific. There's also fines in there if they're not putting in the right items.
Okay.
And we monitor that very frequently.
I wanted to say thank you for your efforts in this regards to move us to more healthy, you know what I mean, food options. The real chicken that we have inside of our schools now is a real good one. The
As opposed to?
well, they used to have it was a little bit different. And,
You don't want to answer that?
It was real chicken. It was real chicken.
yeah. So funny story. So I do a lot of stuff with the Temple Terrace Boys and Girls Club, and the kids came forward and they said, Mr. Susan, we want real chicken inside of our schools, right? And what they meant was bone in and stuff like that, so they could see it. And so then I brought it up to Mr. Wilson, and Mr. Wilson said, it's funny you say that because we're moving forward in 1 month to doing that. So then I went back and I said, hey guys, this is going to change. So Temple Terrace Boys and Girls Club thinks that they made this change to real chicken for the whole district. But I did want to say thank you for all of your work. Thank you for your thing. It was funny, real chicken. I actually have that in a frame at my house. It talks about that real chicken. It was funny. All right, moving on. 8540, I don't hear anybody wanting to speak on that. 8550, competitive food sales. Mr. Wilson.
No BPS policy needed. This policy is embedded in 8500 number 2.
Okay. So your argument is that we don't need this.
Correct.
Okay. Any board member wish to speak to this? All right. Moving on. 8600, transportation. Mr. Wilson.
Refer to staff. We need to update this policy to reflect the camera information that we're getting ready to put on the stop arms. So
Yeah.
it currently does not reflect that, so we're going to refer that to staff.
And we just did this one.
Correct.
You're not done until you're done with it, right?
All right. Let me ask you, okay, any board member wish to speak to this?
No.
I have something which I need to see. It's more about the administrative procedure. Yeah. So board, I would like us to look at this, and I think we probably need to give direction. The school district fee-based transportation service, what happens at the beginning of the school year is a lot of times you'll have someone who's looking to possibly switch their bus routes, or maybe even inquiring to say, hey, I know I'm inside that 2 miles, but I'm willing to pay that fee. Can you put me on this bus? But the administrative procedure says that no fee-based transportation will be allowed during the first 15 days of school. And I get, I sat down with Mr. Miller and we discussed this. In order to ensure that our buses have capacity availability for students that might be moving around or coming into the district. So one of the things that we kind of discussed and thought would be a good idea is if we just added 4 buses that are at 95% capacity. It would allow them to be able to move somebody into a fee-based option. That way that their family doesn't have to take them to school and pick them up for the first 2 weeks. It gives us the ability to do that. Most of our buses aren't well, I shouldn't say that, but we're going to get to a place where these buses are not operating at 95% capacity. Some of them have been over 95% capacity, but it was just a recommendation that I thought would be good.
Just to clarify, you're talking about 8610.01,
I
correct?
am.
Okay. We're not there yet, but I just wanted to make
I
sure I'm
jumped
like,
ahead,
okay,
sorry.
because I was like, I don't see that in here.
I didn't.
Yeah, Ms. Wright, I really like that. That has been a major complaint from people
Yeah.
when, you know, they got to figure out the first 2 weeks of school how to get their kids
Yeah.
get going, or make them walk a really unsafe route that necessarily they shouldn't be walking. So
I'm sorry, I totally jumped right ahead and I did not.
But you
mean
know,
to.
it's because we don't have a policy for 8610.01. We have an administrative procedure without a policy.
Right. All right, sorry, we'll go back. I
you're.
saw 8,600 and I was like ready. I had my
Yeah,
stuff here, so I was ready to type
Why, I
that
wonder
one.
why we would number the administrative, because that's a transportation administrative procedure. I wonder why we would number it.
It seems like it should be maybe a policy. I don't know.
Yeah, can we just, while we do that, can we, because that way people are looking, you know, I know when I go look for administrative procedure, I want it to be the same number. Can we fix that while
Yeah.
we're looking at that?
Okay, so sorry, we'll get back on track and then I'll say,
And that's duly noted. We discussed that.
we did.
All right.
So it does fit with this one because it's a transportation.
It's a transportation,
Yeah.
so I guess let's go through, the first 8,600.
Yep. Anybody else wish to speak to this policy? Mr. Wilson, I have a quick question for you. We have those outside of since we're kind of on the related here, and I'm not sure if it fits into here, but we have third-party vendors for our buses, right? And those third-party vendors that are for our buses, we have requirements for those individuals. And there's been a couple of calls that I've received over creating some standards wrapped around when we have those third-party buses that we use through a vendor, that they have a certain set of standards, like 3-point harnesses, you know what I mean, aged fleet and all that other stuff. If it's not appropriate here, I may want to engage with you as far as maybe possibly bringing it back somewhere if it doesn't already exist, like, you know, requirements on insurance and all those other things, just making sure that those things are in there. We good on that?
We can revisit that.
Perfect. I'll review it and then we can bring it back to the board. All right, anybody else have any other questions to 8,600? Hearing none, we're going to move on to 8,600.04 bus certification. Does anybody have any questions to that? Mr. Wilson?
Last updated 2002, okay as is, no newer Neola language updated.
Oh, wait,
Provided.
but there, I think someone must have copy pasted wrong because there's actually quite a lot on this one.
Yeah.
We have like 3 paragraphs and they've got 3 pages, 4 pages. Because I'm seeing a 2019 update, so can we take that back?
We didn't see that one.
Yeah, yeah.
Is this an attachment to an email? It's not on the,
Yeah.
sorry, I'm trying to.
No, it should be on the regular, it was right under transportation, right under 8,600. 8600.04, right?
Okay, sorry.
And if we have it somewhere else, that's fine, but there's a lot on here
You know
about,
what, Ms. Campbell, you're correct. I misspoke. That is a refer to staff.
okay.
You're 100% correct.
Yeah.
Thank you, Ms. Campbell, for catching that. All right, anybody else wish to speak to that item? Hearing none, moving on. 8604, student or school bus driver working hours safety procedures. Mr. Wilson?
Which one's that?
8604?
8604.
Yes, sir.
We have as 8604. Okay as is.
Okay.
Well, it doesn't have one.
We currently have a BPS policy.
Correct.
It's just that we don't have a Neola update. So you're okay with saying that it's okay? Does anybody wish to speak to that? Hearing none, moving on. 8605, school bus safety procedures. Mr. Wilson?
Okay as is.
Recommendation is to keep 8605 as it stands. Anybody wish to speak to that item? Hearing none, moving on.
Looking at me, Mr. Susan.
I'm actually looking at him, then I look down this way, and then I go. So 8606, school bus driver cellular phone use. Mr. Wilson?
Okay as is. Last updated 09 and no new Neola language.
Ms. Campbell?
Yeah, I think this one, I mean, we may not need it, but this one, Neola updated in 2013, and again, maybe just a copy paste thing, but I didn't, there's a few things in there that are different. Nothing huge.
Nothing major, so that's why we decided to keep it.
Okay, okay.
Are you requesting that we possibly take the most updated one from Neola? Because I'm okay with that to just be safe, or do you wish to?
Can you just take one more look at it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Thanks.
Take a
Ms.
look at
Wilson.
it. Yep,
We
absolutely.
appreciate that. I can see where she's coming from on that one.
Yep.
All right. Hearing any other conversation? All right. 8610, transportation route planning, Mr. Wilson.
Give me 1 second, make my notes here. $86.10, that's a refer to staff.
Okay. Anybody wish to speak to 8610? Hearing none, moving on. 8625, ban on texting while driving.
Can we, what's going on? Sorry, 86.
25.
Well, can we go back to the 8610.01, the administrative procedure? Is this something that we should look at implementing into policy rather than administrative procedure?
So that parents can see it, is that what you're saying? Okay.
What is the thoughts?
Oh, that was the
Yeah,
fee
I think-
base.
I think that's the one we talked about being under the 8,600.
Right, the one I was talking about.
Yeah, I agree. I think if they're gonna do it, it should be in the policy, where parents are gonna find it.
Right.
Okay.
Dr. Miller, is there any, can I ask you, is there any hesitancy for you as far as this being converted from administrative procedure over to policy? No? Okay. And
Oh, wait. I didn't realize you were wanting to make it policy.
it would be the creation of this into policy rather than procedure.
Okay, well, because some of that is, I mean, it is a procedure. It's like, here's how you're gonna charge them and all that. So I didn't realize that's what you're asking. You wanted to make it a policy.
I'm sorry, so I thought we were talking about the clause with the 95%.
Right.
Yeah.
So, well, I guess it's two things I'm asking. So one, do we want to make this policy versus procedure? And then two, is the board okay with us adding that clause for buses at 95% capacity, which should fall under the last sentence of the first paragraph for the fee-based transportation program?
Can they bring that back to us? As far as policy versus administrative procedure, I think it just a matter, it just depends on what is its function. And we can, we've asked them to bring us updated administrative procedures from now on, just kind of let us, get eyes on those. So I don't know that I can tell you right this second what I think, because
Okay.
I want to take a look at that.
Okay,
what-
might be something we need to
Well,
discuss
this is
further.
8610 we're referring to, correct?
Right.
Point
correct.
01.
The
.01, okay.
administrative procedure, not the
Okay.
policy. There is no policy, so.
Regardless of where it goes, I do agree, though, that the caveat about the 95% should be in the policy, just because I do believe that that's where a parent's going to go to see that information, if they're even going to seek it out, or it's just easier for us to refer to. So I think that's important to have it out there.
Well, the other thing, I'm going to throw this out there, and again, this will be a discussion to maybe have and look further into, and I can pass along the information that I've received. But the fee-based student transportation, I really would love to see the district not charging families, because most of the time what you find is you have a family that's 1.75 miles from the school, but their child has to cross a major highway, and so it's very dangerous. They don't want them to walk. And so now we're given the fee-based option to, hey, well, you can ride the bus, even though your next door neighbor
But that
potentially could.
shouldn't be fee-based, right? Because there's
no.
exceptions
It's a-
for, example.
hazardous, it's
Right,
statutory.
It's hazardous walking ways. If they, for example, in West Melbourne and on Milwaukee, I know you guys weren't familiar with these streets, but we just had this situation where there's a road that has absolutely no sidewalks. It's a very busy road. It comes up to Minton, and those students technically are within the 2-mile radius of Meadow Lane, but they've always been able to ride the bus because there is no walkway without being on the street of a very busy road. So they fall under that hazardous. So it's a situation where they have to just go out and look at it and see if there's no crossing guards and they're on, like they're walking along the side of a busy road, that kind of thing. Those exceptions should not be fee-based.
If I can speak to that real quick. So what I think there is statutory law that says that if it falls under certain criteria, that it's considered hazardous. I utilized that in getting some of the Manatee Parents bus because of the Diamond intersection that was over here in Vieira. So I think that the argument is that we should actually make that hazardous part of the policy so that the parents understand that they can apply for the hazardous component. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah. Yeah.
That would make sense. But I don't want to do that unless Mr. Miller is comfortable with allowing, are you okay with that? Okay, so I think that that would assist so that people know that they can apply for the hazardous and what the criteria for that is. Yeah.
Yeah, and that hazardous part is already in the 8,600. Maybe it needs to be clearer.
Okay.
Well, and I guess where I was just going with this is that, I mean, we
Or
looked
maybe
at,
it's an 86
sorry, I
ton.
know I'm gonna beat this one a little bit, but, last year there was 216 students that paid for fee-based writing, just to put it in context of how many students we're talking about. And again, I think what you're gonna find is majority of these students are at that really close to the 2 mile. They're just not quite there. And, parents are working and they can't take them to and from school. And so you're either asking, because I think where the major concern, I had one this year, was, hey, they had to cross a major highway. And yes, there's lights and there's sidewalks, but I mean, if you're talking about an 8-year-old or a 10-year-old to cross a major highway because it's within 2 miles, then, you know, that's still very dangerous. And I wouldn't even send my 12-year-old to go and do that by themselves. So just again, something that maybe we look at, can the board take the initiative of, is this something that we could possibly take on so that we're not burdening a family with several hundreds of dollars in transportation fees when they're right on that cusp. And a lot of times, again, you'll see that same street, you'll have a kid that's 6 houses down that can ride the bus, but this one can't. And so you know how maddening that would be from a parent's perspective.
No, I understand.
So,
And what I would like to see us is get out from a drowning position with transportation, and we're almost there. But if that's something they feel like they can take on, you know, once we get in
well,
a better
it would
position.
require us to take the initiative of potentially adding additional funding there to cover those 216 students is what it would be.
Can I provide a potential solution? And I don't know the answer to this. So if a family calls and they say, you know, I want to put my child on this bus, the fee-based thing, are they routinely asked, is it hazardous or is there potential danger? Is that question posed in any way? Or do they fill out a form that has to ask that question? Okay, is that question on there? So, I mean, maybe we could look at doing something like that. So that way it kind of flags the district to know that there may be something that they need to take a look at. And then it's not in the burden of the parent to identify whether or not that fee should be forgiven. That might be a compromise of some
I will
some
tell you
sort.
that I think it was Pasco they had for, I don't know how long they had it, but they had a place where they moved the 2 mile statutory requirement down to 1.5 miles to provide that. But they just had to undo that because of the situation. They found themselves in the same situation we were in. So, you know, it's something depending on budgetary constraints, you know, depending on transportation, you know, hiring restraints, whatever it may be, we may need to remain nimble in that area just because we don't know what will come up in the future.
Okay, I think we,
But so, Ms. Wright, you said I'm assuming you got the number from transportation was 200 something. So it is a really low number. So if we just add that question, at least we know we can capture some of those families maybe that aren't saying it themselves because they don't know that it's an option to say, and it kind of relieves some of the burden from some of those families at least. I mean, it's a simple addition to relieve some of the burden.
Yeah.
okay.
Do you have anything you want to add? Sorry, I know you did this number, which usually means you want to talk.
No, it is good to have this. I mean, I had a situation in Endeavor at the end of last year that a group of students, they were just not coming to school. It was because they had to cross the busy intersection there, and they were trying to come up with ideas and ways to go get those students and bring them. And it was the parents that worked that just said, it's safer for the kids to just stay here. So anything we can do to expand that or have that for the hazardous would be.
That just throwing this out there because we might come into situations because we actually have some schools that have no buses, and I think Endeavor is one of those, right?
No, they have buses.
They do have buses.
They have buses.
Yeah, they have
They have
Okay,
buses.
so we have.
Surfside has no buses.
Okay. Would we be creating something where all of a sudden now we have to provide service buses in schools that we've not had to before because of where we set that number? So that's another thing I would want them to take a look at before we commit to making any other changes.
So Dr. Miller, will you, I think I'm on, yeah. Will you do me a favor and just look at, I mean, we can even sit down if you guys want to, I don't know. I've sat down with, the transportation's kind of been my baby a little bit this year. So if there's ways that we can improve this process and make it more user-friendly for our families and make sure our children aren't crossing major highways, whatever we can do there, I would love. And I think adding Ms. Jenkins' suggestion to add that box, it's just something very simple to check off, that the family feels like there is something that is dangerous, then that can be a triggering point for us to look at. Yeah.
And of course, like, the district would have to assess it, right?
Right,
Like, it
right,
doesn't-
yeah.
It doesn't just mean that the parent gets affected.
Everyone's gonna
I wanted
check.
to make that clear.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry, I know I jumped ahead there.
Where were we? We're on 8625.
We are on 8625, ban on texting while driving.
8625, refer to staff. There's currently no BPS policy, and we're going to probably adopt the Neola policy, but we want to review it first.
Okay. All right. All right, 8640, correct? Transportation for field and other district-sponsored trips.
Last updated 2010, no newer Neola update, and okay as is.
Let me look at this one. Give me 1 second.
Ours is actually a little bit longer.
Yeah, ours is a lot longer than well,
Which one is that?
8640.
8640?
8640, yeah. The what?
What?
Yeah, they did. So that's, he said refer to staff. Sorry, I'm filling him in. And something a policy that we're looking to implement. Yep. Okay. So you want to keep 8640 as is? Is that correct? Sorry.
Correct.
All right, you're on the next one.
Any board member wish to speak to 8640? Hearing none, moving on to 8645, use of school buses. Mr. Wilson?
Refer to staff. There's currently no BPS policy,
Okay.
and we're going to review the Neola policy.
Does any board member wish to speak to this?
Have we ever done, there's a, that section on allowing other entities to use our buses. Have we ever done that?
Not to my knowledge.
Okay.
No, I would not recommend that.
Yeah, no, I mean, we're busy enough. We're not sharing.
I don't think we have any extras, as Ms. Jenkins spoke to.
All right, moving on to employee transportation, 8651, Mr. Wilson.
Last updated 02, admin procedure update 06, and no newer update from Neola, so we're going to keep as is.
Okay, this is
title.
one that Neola had one in 2010, so I don't know if we need it, but,
We looked at it, and
oh, you know what? This is completely different.
Yeah, it's different. Our 8651 is employee transportation.
Yeah.
Neola's is board-owned
Board-owned
vehicles.
vehicles.
We can get the,
so we looked at it yesterday.
So we don't need, you don't think we need that,
Correct.
because like they're not even the same
They're not.
policy.
So then we're going to repeal employee transportation, is that what you're saying? Sorry, I'm trying to understand.
No. We don't, I guess, I'm here, to we live like 8651, which is employee transportation, and we don't need Neola's board-owned vehicles
Right.
policy, is what you're saying.
so the idea is to keep it the same. Anybody wish to speak on this item? Hearing none, we're moving on.
Give me a second. I do think we need to have a policy for board-owned vehicles.
So I'm looking to see if we have that somewhere else.
Maybe it's,
Do we?
8651 is employee transportation, correct?
right.
Right.
We don't, I don't recall seeing this, so.
We have,
What?
No, we don't. I think we need to have a policy for our board-owned vehicles.
And what are you saying?
like the white fleet.
Well, yeah, I mean, that we have more than just
What is that? There's an admin policy, procedure, excuse me.
procedure.
Oh, yeah, 8651. Okay, so this is one of the things, school district employee assigned vehicles.
Oh, well, all right, this should say board, school district, not school board, because we're not using our.
Right, school district.
So that's what I was reading.
Well, they are technically.
Yeah, but
Well, they're-
no, we don't own them. Like, there is no board that owns them. The school district owns them. The school district of Brevard County, not the school board of Brevard.
It's
Okay.
weird because it is a board-owned vehicle, which.
Right, it's kind of misleading there. That's okay, that's something. to-
I believe this should be policy, not necessarily administrative procedure, but that's my personal preference. Board,
Can-
what is yours?
Can we just take a look at it? So it sounds like we need to keep 8651, our 8651, which is employee transportation. But can you guys, so you're asking, can we take a look at Neola's 8651, which is a board-owned vehicles policy, which looks like it aligns
It
with
does.
administrative procedure 8651. But can we just make sure there's nothing missing in there that?
And just for transparency, put school district rather than board.
Well,
We'll take a look at it.
I mean,
For legal purposes, the school board
I was gonna
owns
say,
them.
every
The
building-
legal entity is the school board of Brevard
Right.
County.
yeah, everything is board-owned.
This employee transportation seems to mimic a little bit of this board-owned vehicles. It's kind of a cross between them, so I think we need to,
So do we want to make it a policy, a separate policy, or
Or
what are we
blend
asking?
them?
I think we need to blend them, honestly.
The only thing is, like the Neola one that's board-owned vehicles, as, you know, it is, like ours also talks about
Right.
volunteers being able to ride school
School
buses,
buses,
and
right.
so they might be separate, so we might need two different
That's,
ones. You wanna let them take a look and see if there's any
Yeah.
crossover and,
All right. Mr. Wilson, you get it, right?
yep.
Okay, moving on. We have 8660, transportation by private vehicle. Mr. Wilson,
We're gonna refer this to staff.
thank you. Any board member wish to speak to this? Hearing none, moving on to 8700, anti-fraud. Mr. Wilson?
That's not me, that's CFO, Ms.
Oh,
Cindy.
there it is.
Sorry.
So I apologize, 8700, which is the anti-fraud policy. It's both BPS and it has a Neola update. What would you wish to have happen?
Yeah, I would like to have staff review this. I'm very interested in looking at all the internal controls, and this just seems to have so much in it that I really want to take a look and make sure that we're covering what we need, and maybe this covers some other areas with property and some of the other areas with internal controls. But I just want to make sure that
Sure.
it's well
Okay.
done.
Does any board wish to speak to the anti-fraud policy? Hearing none, moving on. 8710, insurance, Ms. Lisinski?
Yes, that one was updated in December 21, and we don't have any recommendations for any changes.
Okay, does any board member wish to speak to this? Hearing none, moving on to 8740, bonding.
Yes, we reviewed that, and we don't see any changes in Neola or need for any changes.
Okay. Next, any board member wish to speak to 8740? Hearing none, moving on to 8760, student accident insurance.
Again, that's one that we reviewed and no need for changes.
Any board member wish to speak to this? Hearing none, moving on, 8770, joint self-insurance pool.
Right.
Ms. Lisinski?
This one does not have a Neola policy, or wait, yes, it does. But we don't have
We
this
don't have
policy because it doesn't apply to us
okay.
currently. Maybe in the future, we might look at something like that, but we don't have a policy. I mean, we don't pool with other organizations right
Right.
now.
So I wanted to tell you that this is a good opportunity for us in the future to take a look at, and even Paul and I were talking about it. There's a break point of like 8,000 or 10,000 employees where the cost is not going to change for the entity. But if we were to pool with the smaller cities and municipalities inside of Brevard County, we would give them rates that would increase or decrease their cost of healthcare. So for instance, right now, say for instance, Cocoa has, I don't know, 700 employees. They have to go out to a self-insured model, and what they do is they go to the market with 700 employees. You can create a self-insured risk pool where we and Cocoa join together. They control all of their own deductibles, all of their own thing, but their pricing model matches ours. So it's more of a discussion and something that I might bring to you guys a little bit later on. But it happens across the state. Like, this is a regular thing. We're not tied to each other for any entity, but it allows the entities to enter into a risk pool together, meaning that the cost of what they pay for the procedures is reduced for the smaller of the two. And there's a price point that always varies between 8 and 11,000 people. That is where that break point doesn't matter. So like we may be above that point to where we're not going to receive any better benefits, but it's an opportunity to assist many of our other locations. And it's something that I think I'm going to bring to the table when we go to talk to each one of those municipalities inside of ours. There's also other things that we can do in that aspect that's very good. So I understand we don't need to make a policy about it because we don't really have it yet.
Right.
But I wanted to explain the open door that we may be able to do. And in some cases, I mean, we have our employee count may be below that. So actually increasing by joining with the county or something like that on one of these may actually save us some of that revenue. And I think it's worth it for us to take a look at on an interval to see if that would be beneficial to us. That's all.
I'm curious, Mr. Sisson, are you suggesting a plan, is that type of plan be something that so if they join in with us, we're still the controlling entity as far as doing the contracts, because our insurance is tied into our contracts with our employee unions, and so I don't think we could tie like the design of the plans and things and the costs and things into other entities where they get a controlling voice.
It's a fallacy inside of group joint self-insurance that you have to be tied to other people's plans, deductibles, all that stuff. It's not. All you do is you enter into a purchasing agreement risk pool. And what happens is we come in and we say we want a deductible at $200. We have a co-insurance of this. We have all of those things, right? The other entities say this is what we have. We have this, and they can have a completely separate plan. The only added benefit is that we are entering into a risk pool for purchasing. So we would say, okay, Cigna, United Healthcare, all of the entities, we're entering into this agreement that we just would like you guys to give us the rates, and then we will develop our own plans on the side, and that's how it works. And you can do that for stop loss. You can do it for all of it. I actually do it in
I
other
have a
places.
question though. Does that mean that they would be forced into taking the type of insurance that we selected then, correct?
Yeah, we would not be the selection. What we would do is we would go to market, and then they would come back and they would say, okay, here's what we have.
Okay.
And you would select either a lead like us, or you would select a committee. So we would become the lead, or you would select a committee that makes up the 3 individuals that say who we would like.
Okay.
It's a model that can be modified and changed however we want. The county tried to do it about 10 years ago, and some of the cities wanted to be able to, he did it in a way that he was going to set what the deductibles were for everybody, and that's not the proper way to do it. There's another way to do it. So I'm just saying, we don't need to move forward with a policy, but your question is one of the ones that comes up all the time, is that entities think that they're going to have to buy into exactly what our plan is. That's not the case. You enter into a stop loss, say for instance, you increase all of your stop loss pool, then you lower the costs. It's a model that goes across the state of Florida. There's entities that use it all the time, and it's actually nationwide that they do this.
I'm curious then, because the pool of money is also something, considering then everybody's at risk for every.
I know your mind keeps going back to that being.
You don't know what my mind's doing, so don't say stuff like that.
Well,
but just then explain that to me, because when we talk about self-insurance pool, it's the pool of money. So I want to know, is that, do you know, or do we need to look into, does that mean that like our self-funded insurance plan, that the money they put in, everybody, it's all still one pot of money that's paying out the claims?
No, it's not.
Okay,
So,
thank you.
Yeah, just to reiterate what it is it's a purchasing agreement, more so than an entire plan put together. There's 2 ways to do the joint agreement. Is everybody's in, we create the exact same plan, and then we go off that. Or you enter into like asking Cigna to provide their lowest cost. And what that does is, because you have so many people, if they win the contract, they provide that lowest cost, and then everybody creates their own plans, has their own reserves, has everything else on the side. This is done in some entities with over 120 municipalities in one on a purchasing agreement. And there's ways to do it, and I've done it all the way from Florida to North Carolina, but it's something to look at to reduce cost. And I know that some of our municipalities have said it would definitely help us. The only reason we would entertain it is to get us above that break point of where those numbers actually make sense. So the first conversation would be to ask our medical providers, at what break point would we receive a reduced cost, or are we there yet? And if we do get to a certain number, we would see a reduced cost on our each one of our claims, then we may want to enter into a conversation with some of the municipalities, and if they're interested, what that looks like. It's a long road, but I did just want to bring it up here because part of the insurance pool things that people think is that you have to join your reserves, join everything together, do it all. That's not the case. So, but that is a model. It's just very restrictive, and many of the carriers do that to put handcuffs on the people to where they can't get out of it. And there's a bunch of other things, but there is an opportunity to do joint purchasing agreements. So we can talk about that.
I think it would be an awesome opportunity or an offering to our municipalities, because I'm sure they're getting a higher insurance rate with them
Yep.
coming in with only having a few hundred employees, or maybe even 1,000 versus what we're coming in with ours. So I understand the purchasing power of being a larger group that gives us more benefits. So
You have your small municipalities like Satellite Beach that have, say, 150 to 200 employees. What they can do is they can turn around and join into it, and they can actually move to a self-insured plan. If we're collaborating on our stop loss, then they'd be able to purchase the stop loss price and set it up a different way, so that what ends up happening is that they would actually be able to move to a self-insured with that stop loss and save a ton of money. So it's an opportunity to save them, but we have to make sure it benefits us before we engage in something like that. That's all, and what it is. But I just thought part of a process of review to do every 3 years or something like that might be something we do, and it might be time to have conversations wrapped around it, maybe for something next year conversation. All right. Moving on. There we go. 8800 religious patriotic ceremonies and observances. Ms. Dampierre.
8800.
8800, sorry.
Okay. It was last revised on October 2018. However, we just received a Neola update on volume 24, number 1. We have reviewed the policy, and we will more than likely accept Neola recommended changes. So any feedback on that?
I have a lot of things that I'd like to meet with you offline and check in with legal on. I'll do that. There's, I don't know, there's been some conversations wrapped around having meetings and stuff at other locations and stuff like that of religious areas that we got into lawsuits with and everything. I just kind of want to put our heads around what laws have changed and stuff, but I'm not ready to make a recommendation yet, so I'd like to just do that offline and see. Does anybody else wish to speak to this item? All right, hearing none, we'll move on. 8805, Chief of Schools. Model policy on religious expression in public schools.
I feel like Mr. Raymer would really like to come to the microphone right now.
he's like,
Never done this before.
Mr. Raymer, welcome to the table.
Yes, thank
The
you.
policy that we're bringing up, and I apologize, I did not, I may not have given you enough time. 8805 is the model policy on religious expression in public schools.
Yeah, so some of the policy is in parts of our other policy, such as like clothing with dress code, and there's some other aspects, use of district facilities, clubs, et cetera, that are in some of our policies across the district. I did have a question for Paul, because this one was certified by the DOE in 2018. Most of the other policy updates come from Neola. So I was just seeking some clarification, because it came in 2018 and we haven't adopted it yet.
Right. It was a part of the statute cited there that the state provide a model policy for districts to consider. I'd have to go back and review the language to see if the statute requires us to, but Neola would have likely, they usually put a note on there saying required to adopt, and that's not here, so I'm assuming that they do not require us to adopt it.
Yeah, so I would, recommend, we haven't adopted it for the 5 years that it's, since 2018. If we were to, I would adopt it as presented in the Neola template. But there are some aspects of it that, we would carry through some other policies, such as, like I said, district facility use, dress code, religious freedom of expression that the Supreme Court has been pretty clear on, directions that school districts would go for that.
Okay. Does any board member wish to speak to this?
I'm in favor of adding this policy.
Absolutely.
absolutely love this policy.
I think we move to it. If anybody wishes to add anything or speak to it, I would also include to check with Paul on this one to just say, hey, if you've got something else you want to add, make sure it's legal. But thank you, Mr. Raymer, for coming up and
perfect.
giving an overview.
Appreciate
on
the
it.
opportunity.
Yep, absolutely. Any other conversation left on this? Hearing none, moving on. 8810, the American flag. My favorite topics. This goes to Mr. Wilson.
Yes, we want to refer to staff.
Okay.
We want to refer this one to staff. And and why? Because do we want to display the official motto of the state of Florida in front, in other places, in God we trust? Is that what we want to do?
We're required to
As-
do it. You say other places, you mean beside, because I think it has to be, like, even, didn't it go down to, like, telling you what size the letters have to be and?
Yeah, the statutes do prescribe how you do it.
Correct.
And I know it's usually in the lobbies of all the
Correct.
schools.
So,
Are you talking about, like, where it says and in each building?
correct.
So we don't have it in each building, just at the schools?
Just at the front, it's typically in the front office of the school.
Okay.
Do you need direction
I
on
do
that?
need some direction.
I'm okay with putting it in front of all the facilities, but it may, what you're saying is that that may be cost productive and everything else is what you're
Yeah.
saying, but we are covering the schools.
Correct.
Okay, so where's everybody's head at on this?
I want to say what we did a couple years ago when that first took place, when we put them in the schools, is I think we're using the seal, right? The seal of the state of Florida, which includes the motto, and as long as it was big
Right.
enough, then we're using that. I want to say that's what we have in our front offices. Can we just order more of those for our other facilities if it's that simple? Yeah, I mean, there's the seal of the state of Florida has that. Why not put that in there? But is it so? And also haven't looked at the statute to see if it's required in other places besides the schools.
I guess Mr. Wilson can check that to see if it's required in other locations besides the schools. And then I think we have in favor of moving forward and adding it to the front. But I would ask Mr. Wilson if there's a way to get a cost for that, just so that we know ahead of time. I don't think it would inhibit any of us from making that decision, but just that way we know ahead of time how much something like that would cost us to do. Any other conversation after on that? All right. Hearing none, that was 8810. Moving on to 8900, printing, copying services. This is GCR. Mr. Broom.
This was adopted in 2002. There's no change in the language, although this and the next one do need administrative procedures.
This is kind of a weird policy if you look
Yeah.
at it. It's like the highest quality, there's no metrics, there's no nothing. I mean,
Who says it's the
do we care to, do you want to repeal this thing? Just seems to me like, or do you want to keep it?
Possible. I mean, we obviously can't buy industry top of the line.
Yeah.
That's not possible.
Yeah.
So,
I was just saying, like, it just seems kind of weird, like,
I know.
I don't know.
I think it's fine the way it is. I mean, we always try to be as effective with taxpayer money when it comes to buying materials for printing. That's a good reminder that that's the board's stance, but whatever you guys wish to do, we'll obviously do.
Is there procedures?
As I mentioned, like this one and the next one, 8910, need administrative procedures.
They
There's
don't
no
have
more.
procedures. Okay, as I say, I don't see an administrative procedure around it, so.
I don't know. If you want to keep it, it's fine. It's one of those things that we have that I don't know how effective it is, no metrics. It's just like somebody came up with a great idea and just put it in there. So, all right. Hearing no objection to it and hearing that staff would like to keep it, we'll move on. 8910, publishing standards. Mr. Brune.
Very similar to the previous one adopted in 2002. There's no changes from Neola in the language. And again, this one does need administrative procedures. There's none listed right now.
Okay. So recommendation is maybe update it from Neola and bring it forward, and that's it? Or keep it?
Create administrative procedure.
Create administrative procedures if we
Okay.
keep it. Yeah.
Does anybody wish to speak to that?
do we need administrative procedures?
I feel like both of these are a little bit like, why? I don't know.
I would,
mean,
I would support whatever you guys want to do, but the policy does say that it needs administrative procedures. That's why I mentioned it.
There's a difference, though, because and this was the same way with the one that came today. This one says, therefore, the superintendent shall develop procedures that describe the minimum available standard that all, I mean, if we have those, then let's do it. But to me, that's different than if a policy specifically says, the superintendent shall develop administrative procedures,
I see, yeah,
You know,
I
there was
understand.
specifically called on to be more specific. I don't know. To me, if the print shop has procedures that they follow to make sure, then I'm good with that.
I just think it's funny that we're going to make the superintendent develop procedures to ensure that the materials published by the district are cost effective. Like, that would be an
Or a minimum
RFP.
acceptable standard. What
That's-
is that?
That's an RFP and stuff like that. I think it just, look, I think it's, whatever. It's probably a
I'm not
couple,
using mimeograph machines anymore. I'm good.
yeah.
You're what?
We're not using mimeograph machines anymore. I'm good.
Yeah,
What's
I'm
the
sure this
gut?
was probably created in 2002 because there was something that was produced that maybe didn't have the standards that the superintendent at that time liked. So they were like, hey, we're gonna make a policy that says that it's gonna meet my minimum standard, whatever that is, but it's so subjective. So
Or the printing company.
I would say refer this to staff, ask Dr. Rendell, does he feel like this is something that needs to be, to me, these both seem
Yeah.
like we don't really need these. I think our standards are pretty good, and everything we produce looks excellent, that comes out,
That's
so.
what an RFP is for.
I think in the big scheme of, work that we need to do, this is probably not a big
No.
priority. So
No.
if you
Don't
all
do
are
any more
okay
work.
with potentially repealing this, we'll run this by Dr. Rendell. And I think you have adequate procedures in your departments to ensure that we're using quality products.
You have my support on the
So
repeal.
if
If
there's
the
no
kids can't read
objection,
it,
we're
then
kind of,
it's not-
I think we'll go in that direction unless
Okay.
we find a reason that we need
Right.
these.
At
think
the
we got
very
three of
least,
us agreeing.
just check, we
Yep.
reviewed it.
I'm good to get rid of
I
it.
want to point out, board, I just noticed, I did
Uh-oh.
not notice this before, that at the bottom on the agenda attachment, at the bottom is the August, August is over, but maybe this was listed here as a demonstration, is the August menu for, go down. The August cafeteria menu.
Yeah, I was just looking at it last night.
And maybe this is to send us a message that it's time for lunch.
I don't know.
It is for
It's
ESF.
11.
So I think that was a note, in case you were going long, Mr. Susan, this was your warning that you better hurry up and let us go eat because.
I
look
don't
at all
even
the
know what's
food.
going on. I was looking at it last night because my son, for the first time, was getting school lunch today, and he was all excited. So we got to choose what he was getting.
I love
All
the
right,
cafeteria.
any other questions for anything? Any board members wish to speak to anything?
Did we have something else that got added to the agenda?
Not that I
No.
knew of. I don't know what the heck's going on.
No, I don't think
There
so.
was
see
something
anything.
wonky was happening
Closing remarks?
yesterday. Okay, no, it's
Nope.
not on there anymore.
Nope. All right. For the good of the board, there we go. Done.
Thank you.
Thank you.